With Halloween over, I thought it'd be time to do my top 10 favourite horror movies with my buddy here. Before we get into my top 10, some honourable mentions. First up, Salem's Lot. Now, this two-part show was released in 1979, starring David Soul out of Starsky and Hutch and James Mason. Now, it was written by Stephen King and directed by Tobe Hooper, who had done the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre and later on did Poltergeist. Now, this scared the shit out of me when I seen it. Little child floating and scratching at the window going, "Let me in!" Terrified me. And that was only the start of it. There's plenty of scares in this, and even today it's well worth watching. So that's my first honourable mention. Next up, 2001's Jeepers Creepers. Now, I have enjoyed this movie since it came out. It spawned a few sequels. Part 2 is pretty good. 3 and 4, absolute shit. But this one's very good. And the creature itself is one of the best in recent times. Now, he comes out every 23rd spring to feed for 23 days. And whatever he takes to his victims, he puts into his own body. So, it's highly recommended. Some very good jump scares and some great kills. So that's Jeepers Creepers. Next up, Dog Soldiers from 2002 in this lovely second sight box set. This is another werewolf movie, a low budget one, but it's turned out to be a cult classic, and I can see why, because it's a very enjoyable wee blast of a movie. Some great kills and some great special effects, even with a low budget. It stars Sean Pertwee and directed by Neil Marshall, who went on to do his Descent, which is a great horror movie, and Hellboy reboot, which is not a good movie, but this one's good, so highly recommend it. And the last of my honourable mentions is 1981's The Howling. Surprisingly, another werewolf movie. Now, this one was released the same year as another extremely successful horror movie, and this one always gets overlooked, but this is a good movie. It's a lot darker and a lot more violent really than the other one. Now stars Dee Wallace as a news reporter who gets stalked by a serial killer, and when she finally meets him, ends up he's a werewolf. But police rescue her in time, but she has problems adjusting, so she gets sent to a colony, which is the start of her problems. So this is a good wee movie to watch, and it was directed by Joe Dante, who went on to do Gremlins and Not Long After, which is another great wee movie. But this is highly recommended. So that's my last honourable mention. And now on to my top 10. And first up, 2011's Cabin in the Woods. Now, this film was written by Joss Whedon, stars a very young Chris Hemsworth, but it's actually Richard Jenkins and Bradley Whitford who steal the show. They're extremely funny in this. Now, it's a normal type horror film, you think, where 5 teenagers head off into the cabin in the woods for partying, but once they're there, they all start getting picked off one by one by all different kinds of evil monsters. Now, I don't want to go into details of getting to this one, but there's some of the twists and turns are fantastic, and a great cameo at the very end. So that's why it makes my top 10 list. And next up, at number 9, 1980's The Fog. Now, this film was written and directed by John Carpenter, my favourite director. He also did the music for this, which is fantastic in this film. It stars Jamie Lee Curtis and Janet Leigh, her mother. And the story is about a small coastal town getting enveloped by a creepy fog. And inside this fog are vengeful ghosts. These ghosts are looking for revenge for what the ancestors of this town had done to them. And it's a great movie. Tension builds up on it as you can't really see what's happening because of the fog. and it's highly recommended. And that's why it's my number 9. And at number 8 is Dawn of the Dead, the 2004 remake. It's directed by Zack Snyder. Screenplay was done by James Gunn, who did the Guardians of the Galaxy movies, and it stars Sarah Pauli and Ving Rhames. Now this film is a mad blast of action and violence and gore. It's still the same kind of story of the original film, where there was a zombie apocalypse, and these ones kind of took refuge in a shopping centre, and then it's just what happens there, them trying to escape. So this is a fantastic movie. It's highly recommended, and that's why it's my number 8. And at number 7 is 30 Days of Night. This is a fantastic movie made in 2007, starring Josh Hartnett and Melissa George. But the standout performer in the film is Danny Houston as the main vampire. The story is of us is an Alaskan town. In winter time, it ends up having 30 days of night, no daytime at all. So this crowd of vampires land and start just eviscerating the population of this small town. And it's a mad blast of a movie. I loved it. And it scares the living ladies of the missus, which is a bonus. So that's why it's my number 7. Now we're at number 6. And it is The Exorcist 3. Now this film was made in 1990. It was directed by William Blatty, who actually was the author of the original Exorcist, and stars George C. Scott, Jason Miller and Brad Dourif. And Brad Dourif is fantastic in this. Now George C. Scott plays a police officer who's following these crimes that have the hallmarks of a deceased serial killer, and it leads him to a mental asylum. Now there's some great jump scares in this, probably one of the best jump scares ever, and I love this movie. I think it's highly underrated, especially with the original Exorcist movie being classed as a masterpiece. So that's my number 6. And number 5 is The Conjuring. Now this film was released in 2013. I believe it's 10 years old, and it was directed by James Wan, who turned out to be a fantastic director. Stars Patrick Wilson and Vera Farmiga as Ed and Lorraine Warren, who are paranormal investigators, and they're called in to help a family who've moved into a new house, and they're being attacked more or less by ghosts. Now this film has some stunning fucking imagery, some great creepy sound effects and imagery, and I think it's one of the best horror films over the last 20 years actually released. The sequel's not too bad either, but everything after that has been a massive letdown. Both non-movies, not very good, and only one of the actual Annabelle movies is any good. But this is my ways I have it at number 5. And at number 4 is Halloween. Now this film was released in 1978, directed by John Carpenter, who wrote it, directed it, and actually came up with the music for it as well. And this is a great first real great horror slasher movie. It stars Donald Pleasence and Jamie Lee Curtis in one of probably is their first role. And the story is about Michael Myers, who escapes the mental asylum and goes back to his hometown, more or less, to start killing again. And it's an amazing movie. He stalks Jamie Lee Curtis' character, and Donald Pleasence, who plays his psychiatrist, is searching, trying to find him and to kill him. It had a budget of 300,000 and ended up making 70 million, so that's an extremely successful film. That's why it spawned so many sequels, most of them terrible. But the original one is the best, and that's why it's my number 4. Is the best. And number 3 is the best werewolf movie ever made, American Werewolf in London. Now, this film was released in 1981. It was directed and written by John Landis and starred David Naughton, Jen Agutter and Griffin Dunn. Griffin Dunn being the stand-up performer. It's about two American backpackers who are travelling through kind of the hills in Britain and get lost on the moors where they were told to stay away from and get attacked by a werewolf, Jack being killed. Now, David's character wakes up in the hospital weeks later, not knowing what happened, and he moves in luckily with a very pretty Jen Agutter, and then starts having crazy dreams, and then ends up changing into a werewolf and going on a killing spree. Now Jack is now haunting him, telling him that he has to kill himself so that he can actually rest in peace, which is where the comedy in this film comes out, because it's very dark comedy. But the stand-up thing in this film is the practical effects. The werewolf change is still the best even to today. Like, this film's 1981 and it still can't even match it at the minute, and that's why this film has garnered a cult following, and that's why it is the best werewolf movie, and that's why it's my number 3. And number 2, there's no surprise, The Exorcist. Now, I've only recently reviewed this film, so I won't go into too much detail. It's 50 years old now, which is unbelievable, and still an amazing movie. And sadly, the new one that's in the cinema is doing pile of shite, which is disappointing. Like, as a possession movie, it's okay, but when you link the name The Exorcist to it, it had to be a lot better. But that's why I have it. This film can't be touched, and that's why it's my number 2. Now we're at the end. The number 1 movie, no surprise, anyone knows me, it's John Carpenter's The Thing. Now, this is my favourite film. I've loved this since the first time I seen it. Now, this film was released in 1982, and it was a flop in the cinemas, and the critics hated it. Shocking. But since then, it's garnered lots of praise, and now it's classed as the best horror movie ever made, and so it's rightly so. Now, the cast on it was a young Kurt Russell and Wilford Brimley, and they're brilliant in it. But the special effects, especially the practical effects that they don't do nowadays involving CGI, was amazing. It hasn't been surpassed even today, and shockingly, E.T. beat it the best Oscar for special effects that year. Ah well. The music, of course, by John Carpenter, really sets the atmosphere, and the story of us is an alien infiltrates a research facility, and they can imitate anything, and whenever it imitates an animal or a person, it kills them. So, but you don't know which one's which, so there's real paranoia in this film because people can't trust each other, and that's what adds to the atmosphere in this movie. And then, of course, it goes right to the climax, which is a fantastic way to end the film. Just not sure where it's going to go.
We'll do you last.
Get away from me! Retreating! What is it?
So that's my favourite film, John Carpenter's The Thing. Now that concludes my top 10 reviews. So please leave a wee like and subscribe. It doesn't cost anything. And leave a wee comment. I'd like to know what your favourite horror movies are. And then I shall see you next week. Thanks very much, and goodbye.